Donald Trump want to go back to the way things were before they met. Both sides, he says, are determined to keep moving toward the North's denuclearization. South Korea's exports were down last month by more than 8% on lower prices for semiconductors. Still, the country posted a healthy trade surplus. And the South Korean government starts enforcing the new 52-hour work week. The grace period is over, and companies found breaking the law will face stiff penalties and fines. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. It's good to have you with us. President Moon says both North Korea and the U.S. are determined to continue talks on the regime's eventual denuclearization. Speaking to his top aides ahead of his meeting with President Trump next week, Moon said neither side wants to go back to the way things were before they started their negotiations. Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in's assessment of the current North Korea nuclear diplomacy is that both Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are committed to continuing dialogue, despite the failure to reach an agreement at the summit in Hanoi in February. President Moon also said that his upcoming trip to Washington is the product of efforts by the allies to help revive the momentum for nuclear dialogue at an early date.
이번 한미 정상회담은 어떤 난관이 있어도 한반도 평화 프로세스를 반드시 성공시키겠다는 우리 정부의 일관된 원칙과 대화를 지속해 북미 협상을 타결하겠다는 트럼프 대통령의 확고한 의지가 만난 결과입니다.
The South Korean leader also directed a message at Pyongyang, saying that he hopes the North responds to such collective efforts by Seoul and Washington and expressed a strong will in pushing through it with his peace drive.
우리는 결코 과거로 돌아가지 않을 것이고 돌아갈 수도 없습니다. 평화와 번영의 한반도를 바라는 우리 국민과 세계인들의 염원을 실현하기 위해 트럼프 대통령과 함께 길을 찾겠습니다. 막힌 길이면 뚫고 없는 길이면 만들며 함께 나아갈 것입니다.
He said the peace process is a journey taken by the two Koreas and the U.S., and that it would be rather strange if there weren't any difficulties along the way, especially when the path had not been successfully covered in the past 7 decades. All in all, the president's message remains unchanged despite the ups and downs over the course of the denuclearization talks. He's hoping his meeting next week with U.S. President Trump will look to get the two big players in the nuclear negotiations, Kim and Trump, back talking again. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The defense chiefs of South Korea and the U.S. will meet in Washington on Monday, local time. Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do and acting U.S. Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan are expected to touch upon pending issues such as the allies' eventual transfer of wartime operational control to South Korea. Other closely watched issues are the combined military drills later this year and the allies' latest Dongmeng joint exercise, which replaced the larger Key Resolve drill. They're also expected to discuss the security situation on the Korean Peninsula post-Hanoi summit and come up with follow-up measures. South Korea began work on Monday to excavate the remains of soldiers killed in the Korean War from areas inside the DMZ, but they had to start without the North. The two sides had agreed in last year's military agreement to do the excavation together on a trial basis starting in April, but South Korean military sources say they haven't heard back from the North. Sources say work started today at Arrowhead Hill, the site of one of the war's fiercest battles. North Korea has reportedly asked Russia for 100,000 tons of wheat flour to get through a crunch as prices in the local market soar. The Japanese paper Asahi Shimbun cites sources, including North Korean defectors, saying that earlier in March, the price of 1 kilogram of rice jumped to $4.63, about a third higher than what it was at the start of last year. It also said the prices of corn and wheat flour were about 50% higher. The paper says prices rose as people stockpiled food because of bad weather and the international sanctions on North Korea. To this, the Russian embassy in Pyongyang said in early March that it delivered 50,000 tons of wheat flour to the north as relief. South Korea will be holding by-elections this Wednesday for 2 seats in parliament. Those are the districts of Changwon, Sunsang, and Tongyang, Gosang in Gyeongsang-Namdo Province. The latest polls show that the single candidate representing both the ruling Democratic Party and the minor Justice Party is in the lead in Changwon, Songsan, while for the Tongyang, Gosang constituency, the main opposition Liberty Korea Party candidate is in the lead. In early voting, turnout in the two districts came to 14.7%, the highest for parliamentary by-elections since the early voting system was introduced in 2013. The by-elections are expected to serve as a barometer of public sentiment in the traditionally conservative province ahead of next year's general elections. President Moon Jae-in says he will work with civic groups to improve governance in the name of national unity, especially with this year being the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Provisional Korean Government. He was speaking in a round of discussions on Monday involving some 80 civic groups, including conservative ones, crediting those groups for what they've done to keep the government in check and to advance Korean society. President Moon said that their role is needed even more today. He called for joint efforts by the government and civic groups to create a social consensus on major issues including fine dust pollution, the establishment of peace on the Korean peninsula, and building a fair economy. The South Korean government's efforts to fundamentally solve the fine dust crisis continue. According to the Environment Ministry, a group of civil servants pushing for the establishment of a national committee on the issue held a signboard hanging ceremony on Monday. Officials from related ministries are expected to hash out the details, such as establishing regulations and compiling budgets. The committee is expected to launch within this month, and it'll be composed of people from the government, industry, academia, and civil society. More signs of weakness in Korea's trade numbers. The figure for March showed exports down again compared to the month before, and again it was semiconductors that led the decline. Kim Da-mi has the details.
Korea's exports fell on year for a fourth consecutive month in March. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, the numbers for March fell by more than 8% on year to $47.1 billion.
The main reasons for the slump include the global economic slowdown, China's slowing economy, falling semiconductor prices, and the lower number of working days.
Semiconductor exports dropped 16.6%, and petrochemical goods were down almost 11%.
The global economy is not likely to improve immediately, which means it will take some time for South Korea's exports to increase. The country's export situation will improve in the second half of the year with an increase in semiconductor exports.
The country's imports also dropped 6.7% during the same period. In particular, imports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment fell 70% on year as a result of local companies' less active facility investment. LNG imports were also down. In the midst of the country's slow trade numbers, the Trade Ministry has also announced on Monday its plan to improve trade finance for local exporters by giving them access to cash through export bonds. In addition to speeding up the introduction of measures to boost exports, the Trade Ministry will hold an export strategy coordination meeting next Tuesday to discuss ways to improve marketing support for exports. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
New duty-free stores to open at Incheon International Airport will be Korea's first in the arrivals area. Opening day is set for May 31st. The customs agency said two small local companies, SM Duty Free and Entas Duty Free, have been selected to run them. They'll be selling cosmetics, perfumes, and alcohol. It'll make duty-free shopping more convenient since travelers can buy things when they get home rather than carrying their purchases with them overseas. It's also expected to create hundreds of jobs. It's time now to take a look at the markets here in Korea and around the world. The closing bell has rung on this Monday with Korean stocks up. We're joined now by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Thanks for making time, Dr. Hwang.
Oh, hello.
Well, last week we saw stocks here and abroad going up and down over these fears of a global slowdown. Has that settled down at all? And what's your outlook for the week ahead?
Okay, global stocks climbed with U.S. Treasuries slipped as evidence of a pickup in China's manufacturing eased concerns about the global economic slowdown. In the United States stock markets, the S&P 500 rose 0.67% as of market close on Friday. The Dow rose 0.82%, while the Nasdaq rose 0.78% on the same date. Today, Japanese shares posted gains of 1.43%, and equities also rose in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Seoul. China's first official economic gauge for March signaled a stabilization in the world's second-largest economy. Futures on the S&P 500 index showed U.S. shares could build on the last week's gains. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury began to stabilize Friday, with Treasury across the curve mostly higher. The yield on the 10-year note rose 2.1 basis points, while the yield on the 3-month bill edged down 3.9 basis points.
So possibly some upbeat indicators to come for the week overseas. But here in Korea, it's earnings week for the first quarter, and we'll be seeing reports from Samsung Electronics and others. Samsung, the big story last week, warning that its profits will fall short of expectations. How are investors going to take this?
Okay, Korean stock market is pretty worried about the earnings report on the first quarter of year 2019. Expectations on the earnings for companies in KOSPI keep declining. Operating incomes of Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which are the number 1 and 2 company by the market capitalization in KOSPI, are more likely to drop sharply. According to FN Guide, a financial information vendor in Seoul, overall operating income of KOSPI companies for the first quarter of 2019 might be 35.7 trillion won, down by 27.5% over the same quarter in 2018. Within IT industry, semiconductors operating income is estimated to be 8.8 trillion won, which is likely to be half year-on-year basis. Until the first half, the earnings outlook for KOSPI companies is expected to remain sluggish, and this implies the lack of conviction in the stock market will continue for a while.
Yeah, especially with those big declines on the profits there we're going to see this week. Now, investors are looking forward to a trade deal between the U.S. and China, who are holding talks that'll continue this week in Washington. What do you see happening there, and is there anything else we should watch this week?
Okay, there are some key events coming up this week. Chinese Vice Premier Li Hui leads a delegation of trade negotiators to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, days after U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer traveled to Beijing. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin wrote in a Twitter post that he and U.S. Trade Representative had concluded constructive trade talks in Beijing. This gives kind of optimistic signals to the market. UK Parliament will take up indicative votes on Brexit proposal on Monday as members seek a compromise to break an impasse over Prime Minister Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. These are a few key events coming up this week.
All right, we'll be looking forward to those, and we'll be discussing those with you later on. Dr. Huang, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your insights today, as always.
Thank you for having me today.
Our pleasure. Now, on those trade talks between the U.S. and China, as Dr. Huang mentioned, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who was in Beijing, said the talks were constructive, and both sides agreed to postpone certain tariffs. Hong Yu has the details.
China has decided to prolong the suspension of increased tariffs on vehicles and automobile parts made in the U.S. starting from April 1st. The Chinese Finance Ministry made this announcement on Sunday, 2 days after the 8th round of constructive trade talks with Washington wrapped up. The period of this suspension was not specified, but the Chinese Finance Ministry had previously suspended the tariff for 3 months, from January 1st to March 31st, with the aim of implementing the agreements by the two countries' leaders. This announcement came after President Trump announced that he had postponed an increase of tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese imports to 25% from 10% that was scheduled to go into effect on March 1st. The next round of talks will continue Wednesday, for which Chinese Vice Premier Liu He will visit Washington. Trump administration officials have said the negotiations are not time-dependent and could take weeks or even months to complete. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Now, from today, big South Korean companies will have to follow the new 52-hour work week or face penalties. The grace period is over. There are still some exceptions, though, for certain industries. Our Ko Ryun-hee reports.
In July 2018, South Korea implemented a 52-hour maximum workweek system, meaning workers are legally only allowed to work 52 hours a week, down from the previous 68. This affected around 3,600 firms with 300 or more employees, but almost 150 companies that weren't prepared in time were given some extra breathing room by the government, an extra 3 months. Now the Ministry of Employment and Labor says the grace period has ended. Companies that have 300 or more employees will be penalized if their workers are found to have worked more than 52 hours in a given week. Business owners can face up to 2 years in jail or a fine of up to $18,000. The ministry added companies that are willing to improve the situation can have up to an extra 4 months to avoid punishment. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean all companies with 300 or more employees are required to follow the 52-hour system. 21 types of businesses, including the accommodation, finance, insurance, and food industries, are expected to start abiding by the rule from July. Also, companies that have expressed a willingness to implement a flexible work system will be exempt from penalties until the related law is revised. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Starting this month, all households, regardless of income, will get a monthly allowance for each of their children 6 years or younger. The Ministry of Health and Welfare announced today that with the new law in effect, that'll be about $88 a month for each child. Before, that subsidy was not available to households in the top 10% income bracket. Those who applied last year but did not qualify will get it automatically, but those who've never applied will have to submit an application. From September, the age cutoff will be raised to 7 years old, at which point it'll benefit the parents of around 2.7 million children. Starting today, supermarkets, department stores, and large shops are banned from giving customers plastic bags, even the little ones you use to bag fruits and vegetables. According to many shoppers, it's going to take some getting used to. Oh Soo-young reports.
Large stores in South Korea are no longer providing single-use plastic bags, in line with a government policy aimed at protecting the environment. The law went into effect on Monday across 2,000 large supermarkets, department stores and shopping malls, as well as 11,000 grocery stores larger than 165 square metres.
So the next time you go shopping, you'll have to bring a reusable shopping bag like this one, or purchase a recyclable paper bag.
Plastic roll bags in particular have been used by Korean shoppers to carry fruit and vegetables and other pick-and-choose items like baked goods. But from Monday, stores caught giving them away will be fined over $2,600. Exceptions have been made for products that can leak or melt, such as ice cream or packs of tofu. For many shoppers, the policy will take some getting used to.
It's so inconvenient. How are we going to carry our groceries now? It's a problem, especially for older people like me.
I try to carry a reusable bag when I can, but sometimes you're in a hurry. I think the policy is too strict.
Other shoppers say they're on board with the ban.
We need the policy for the sake of the environment, our future, and our children.
Environmentalists say the plastic bag ban regulation has been a long time coming. The country has actually banned stores from giving away free plastic bags since 1999 as a measure for environmental protection. But it's clear the law was widely disregarded, with Korea's consumption of plastic bags nearly doubling from 12.5 billion bags in 2003 to 21 billion bags in 2015.
The typical South Korean uses about 420 plastic bags a year, and there's nowhere for these bags to go. In Finland, the per capita average is 4 bags a year. The EU's average is around 200 bags a year, but it's moving to half that number within the next 5 years. So Korea's new policy is a positive and much-needed change.
The Environment Ministry says the new policy could reduce the use of 2.2 billion plastic bags every year. South Korea joins dozens of countries which have imposed bans or taxes on disposable plastics to reduce their detrimental impact on our planet. Oseong, Arirang News.
Baseball season has begun in Korea, and this year the stadiums have been upgraded with cutting-edge ICT and 5G technologies, bringing fans closer to the action. Lee Min-sun tells us more.
An unmanned robotic arm is throwing the first pitch for a local baseball team's first home game of the season. At another stadium, augmented reality sends a dragon flying over the field. Tech is more than a gimmick, though it's giving baseball fans new ways to watch.
With advances in 5G technology, this baseball stadium has added 54 cameras to capture important moments of the game from multiple angles and provide in-depth analysis.
Ultra-high-definition cameras provide simultaneous feed through 5G networks, which enable viewers to watch the game from different angles. Using this mobile app, viewers at home and at the stadium can replay key highlights from the game and zoom in for a closer look. A person sitting in the first base line can enjoy the view from the third base seats or directly in front of the pitcher's mound and even take a peek at the dugout. Cameras track and analyze the movement of the ball and players with motion tracking software, the first of its kind in Asia. It provides detailed information such as the flight course, airtime, and velocity of balls hit into play.
I like how I can use the app to watch from different viewpoints and re-watch run-scoring plays and home runs.
In addition to enhancing the viewer experience, newly installed Findus gauges measure the air quality in different sections of the stadium and sprinkle artificial rain to lower Findus levels.
The biggest advantage of using 5G in sports is that fans can enjoy baseball in a way they have never before. Up until now, people will watch broadcast games, but with our service, they can control what they want to see.
More baseball teams around the country are planning to implement 5G technology to enhance the spectator experience at their ballparks and to also provide more sports-related content. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thanks for being with us. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time. Bye for now.